Well, praise the Lord, hallelujah, and thank you, Jesus. It's around that time right here on KAZ Radio, where I have one of my most favorite shows, none other than What's Going On with Lady D and Sir John. Take it away, Lady D.
Yes, yes. Well, good afternoon, and it's a wonderful Sunday afternoon here in Cleveland, Ohio. And just what a wonderful week we've had. And today is going to be a great day because we are so honored and blessed to have Khalid Salam on our show today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, and peace be unto you, my sister. And it's always good to talk to somebody who came out of the mighty school of John Adams Rebels.
Okay. Yeah, the mighty rebels.
That's right.
And where did you graduate from?
Well, I went to Kennedy.
Okay. The Eagles.
But it never would have been a Kennedy if they had to build a school because the population growth was so big out there in that neighborhood. I was on my way to Adams. I'm thinking about
Were you?
Yeah. But hey, they switched us over. But I always loved my cousins went to Adams, and we had fierce rivalries, but it was always a love thing after the game was over.
Yes, it was. And,
Yeah.
rivalry was good because it kept excitement.
Oh, yeah.
And we were, everybody came out to the game.
It was a community. It wasn't,
Yes.
Not to disparage busing, but that was all pre-busing era, so it was all neighborhood-based stuff.
Yeah. And Kennedy was always well known for their talent shows.
Yeah.
Because we used to come up to Kennedy talent shows.
Oh, yeah. most
And I
definitely.
enjoy Kennedy talent shows because, back then it was the guys had afros.
Right, went that far away.
The guys had afros. And, to us ladies, the bigger the field, the bigger the afro, the cuter the guy
right,
was,
right. We was full steam then.
Oh, yeah.
no doubt. Wow.
Yep. Some good old days. Well, Khalid, tell us what you got going on. I mean, you're well known around the city of Cleveland. You're just one of our number one activists, and you're always there. So give our audience, for those who do not know who you are, give them a little history.
Okay, well, thank you. This next weekend coming up will be the 30th anniversary of an organization that was founded in 1988 called the Coalition for a Better Life. And it came about as a result of some of the challenges that were very, very prominent in our city at that time. As everybody who's been around since that time, who was an adult, remember that in '88 there was this explosion of crack cocaine coming into our neighborhoods and many of our communities. That also was joined with the gang violence. More and more of our young people were joining gangs. It was affiliated with street organizations that were based in cities like Los Angeles and Chicago. And then we also was having a struggle within our cultural community. Everybody knows that, the whole aspect of hip hop, which came out of the East Coast in the early 80s, was a hip hop that talked about culture and, the black experience. There was a heavy influence of the Caribbean and what have you. And then there was this shift to the West Coast, not to disparage people who grew up in the West Coast hip hop community, but there was more emphasis on, issues around. There was a lot of violent lyrics, a lot of violence that were attributed to people that were rappers during that time. And so we decided as community activists and those that were trying to deal with youth development that we had to move beyond our illusions of differences as Muslims, as Christians, as, with Democrat, Republicans, up the way, down the way, whatever we thought divided us was not important as us coming together and what we had in common with each other so we can address these issues that were going on. I mean, the crime was organized back then. The young men, unfortunately, had a lot of weapons, they had guns, and they came in the neighborhoods where the people just weren't prepared to address that. So if evil or confusion is organized and good, and that which is certain has to be organized. And so that's how we developed the concept community for better. And who doesn't want a better life?
Right.
And so that's how we got started. And we began to go into the school systems, the neighborhoods, particularly those areas where the housing projects, or what we call, the JETs, were prominent. Cleveland has, as you know, a lot of housing, authority folks. So we got involved with that, and then we started to reach out to the young men who came out of these gangs and were dealing drugs, to try to get them to cross over and come out of that lifestyle and, learn a trade or get something so they can be community builders as opposed to destroying the community. They can be construction as opposed to destruction.
Okay.
So that's kind of how we got started.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so, may I ask, speaking of all of that, do you find we're still struggling with that today?
Yeah.
As much?
Oh, yeah. What I would say is that, unfortunately, a lot of times when stuff works, people forget about what works, and then they forget the fact that you have to continue to be vigilant. And one of the things that we did, we set up an office right across from King Kennedy, which
Okay.
at that time was the most violent housing project in the city of Cleveland, the second most violent outside of Chicago, which was the base of the most violent housing projects was Cabrini Green and Taylor Homes. We went there and sat down with a lot of their leaders, because the young people were joining gangs that came out of Chicago and Los Angeles. We had BCOs, Brick City Outlaws, and a couple other groups, but they weren't nowhere near on the violent organizational level as these were. So that's how we got kind of started. Harlell Jones, who had been unjustly incarcerated for a homicide for several years, his case was overturned, and Luther Metropolitan Housing Authority gave him office space. And he named it after Denise McNair, one of the young ladies that were killed in the Birmingham church bombing.
Okay.
And then we start training escort services, young men to be escorts, going out, doing gang intervention prevention, bringing people in. And so that's kind of the energy that began to get started. And as anything, you're not going to do that. You're not going to reverse that overnight, because many of these young men, I know you probably heard about the guy called Rick Ross. You got
Yes.
the fake Rick Ross, and you got the real one that was sending,
So,
drugs
what's the
from-
difference between the fake and the
fake,
real?
I don't mean the fake, but he's not the real Rick. He's a rapper,
Okay.
and he named himself after this so-called notorious drug dealer
Okay.
out of L.A. But the boy that was the real Rick Ross, he had a group of young men that came to Cleveland and sold drugs specifically for him.
Okay.
One of them was infamous named young man called L.A.J., who had taken over a couple of housing projects in the city of Cleveland. And we wanted to really kind of deal with that issue of them in particular, because they were violent, they were organized, they were from Los Angeles. And we would, find out that during this time we were doing our research that the cocaine that they were selling in the community came courtesy of the Central Intelligence Agency. The United States government were contracting with CIA, what they call them, contract employees, who was bringing drugs into the United States from countries like El Salvador, Nicaragua, these same countries you're hearing about today with the gangs and all that. They were taking guns and giving the guns to the warlords in those countries and bringing cocaine, which they swore them down they weren't, but we knew that they were. And a lot of their cocaine came in through the ports of Los Angeles. Another entry point was the city of Detroit, which had large gang, one called the Young Boys Incorporated, and they were bringing their drugs in from Arkansas via the CIA jet planes that would come in with cocaine from these same states, and they would, take guns into these same countries and leave the cocaine outside of this Elmina Air Force Base in Arkansas, and then that cocaine found its way to Cleveland. They were making so much money here in Cleveland that they weren't even selling the stuff initially. Because, people were smoking marijuana in the projects and things of this nature. So they came up with something called primos, where they would sprinkle the crack in with what would normally look like a marijuana joint.
Okay.
And then they were just distributing these things throughout the housing projects. So overnight, people became addicted to a high-powered, very potent, form of cocaine. And in a matter of months, many of our neighborhoods were inundated with this. And so that's why we really had to step our game up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So are we still struggling with this academic as much.
Yeah,
Has
I
it
think
toned
it's,
down or
no,
what?
it's reinvented itself. It toned down, and which is another thing. The gangs we were able to start working with the ones that were incarcerated to ask them to be the point people to get their young boys to put the guns down. In particular, groups that fought each other in their turf areas in Los Angeles, Chicago. You had the Gangster Disciples, you had the Blackstone Rangers, you had the Cobras, you had Black Disciples, you had the Latin Kings and Queens, and they were banging with each other. And then you had the LA Bloods and Crips banging with each other. So Omar and us, we started going to these cities as a result of being, taught from young people who had came home from the prisons, how to approach these guys. And we began to do that, and that allowed us to have a major impact. And we started having Stop the Killing summits, where we go out in the neighborhoods and try to organize people, work with, the clergy and people who didn't know what was going on. We went in one church, they had the whole graffiti all on the inside of the bathroom walls in the church. The minister didn't know what was going on. He just saw the 6-pointed star and a little, there was a pyramid or something like this. So he didn't know. He said, oh man, they're drawing. I said, no, that's gang graffiti, bro. That's not no, so he did, but people just didn't know what was going on. So as a result of us going to LA and Chicago, Omar Ali Bey, who was the chairman of the Coalition for Better Life, he was a member of the Blackstone Rangers. He got involved in the military. He was in the military, and he joined this group, this street organization, while he was in the military. And he came back and became a part of the solution after having, some altercations in law enforcement, whatever. So we started an initiative called Peace in the Hood in the early 90s that kind of addressed the gang piece, because that was the overwhelming issue that was going on, because the instability in our communities, in the neighborhoods, in the schools, and even in households, where many times mothers would become addicted, and then they, unfortunately, their lifestyle left their children, to be preyed on by these same gang people, because they look for young people to put their work in, so to speak.
Right.
So that became a part of what we were doing. What we didn't realize at the time, was that the United States government was involved in this, or people who had worked in the governmental structures of the military were the ones that were bringing these drugs in. And then later on, we had these congressional hearings, of which Lou Stokes and other people were in part of. We went down and testified, and many of the young men came out and testified that yes, they were getting these drugs from these countries, and these countries' operatives were people who were involved in their military structure, and they were connected to our Central Intelligence Agencies and things of that nature. And that's when the Black Caucus and all these other people started stepping up. So we started having more of an impact then, because people that knew we weren't just some as they call them, conspiracy theorists, that this stuff was really real, and people started getting indictments. Several people in Los Angeles were indicted. They had, involvement with these, so-called intelligence agencies that work for these sovereign countries. Nicaragua, Honduras, these are the same countries here by now with this game called MS-13. So as America relaxed, as the violence came down in the late 90s, the drive-bys in Cleveland ceased to exist. The young men, we brought them to summits. We went to LA and Chicago, brought their leaders back here. CMHA helped out, the congressman's office, the mayor, and we actually sat down, and they became the peace activists, these young men and women who were on the ground.
Okay.
And as a result of that, the violence and the crime went down in this city. Unfortunately, the President of the United States had signed something called the Omnibus Crime Bill, which was named after these efforts that were going on in California. 3 strikes you're out, minimum mandatory sentences, truth in sentencing, no parole. And so the prison population just exploded in all these states, in particular Cleveland. So then now you have this problem with the men being removed from the neighborhoods, because they're being locked up for having beepers or screwdrivers and a lighter. All those things were deemed as criminal tools. And in a matter of about 2 or 3 years, the United States prison population became the largest, almost double what's in the most ruthless countries in the world. We are by far the biggest incarcerator. So now we're dealing with the 3rd generation down, a lot of young men and young ladies no fathers in the home, and growing up in male-dominated society, cultural things. And not to take away, because I had cousins that were raised by their mothers with no father, but you can't have the whole community with one father on the block. Then the boys become the block. So then you had the resurgence of gangs, which you got now with these gangs called the Heartless Felons, or gangs that are named after streets. And now we are in a situation where the resources are not there because, it's now just being addressed, so to speak, because there's fentanyl, and now you have more and more Caucasian people who are strung out on these drugs. But their plight, they're called, people who need medical help or assistance or whatever. But our people were called crackheads and junkies, and were incarcerated. So you see the way it's being addressed from a suburban, perspective, or a white ethnic perspective is different from the way it was addressed in our community. So that's why I said we're back almost at square one. If it wasn't for the fact that we can relate this history and we documented it, they probably would say it never happened. But we do have the history, and that's why we're going to commemorate that next weekend.
Excellent. So let me ask you now, here in our area, Cleveland, Ohio, our suburban areas, the gang members, they still exist, or are they just a little low-keyed? Because I don't really see or really hear a lot of gang killings.
It's a mess.
It is.
Yeah, the young man that got killed in the parking lot of Zelma George a couple of weeks ago was a result of gang violence. The young man that was killed the night after last at a bar off 131st and Harvard, gang violence. All these shootings that are going on now basically are attributed to guys that are trying to control, their neighborhoods or the streets in their neighborhood. And many of them, for them, this is not just an economic issue. They are culturally, programmed by the social media, the rappers that are constantly telling them it's okay to do this, shoot people, do this, boom, 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 boom. So they're getting messages now that are basically encouraging the lifestyle. And so these, nobody can sit here and tell me these aren't gang related. 90% of these kids that are shooting each other are gang related, young men and young ladies. Now, nobody can prove me different. I've been around this too long to know what it is. So Ohio and Cleveland, Ohio has the 4th largest prison population in the country.
Okay.
Every prison I go to in the state of Ohio, Cleveland has the largest demographic in that prison. So if you start up at Lake Erie College, which is on the border of Pennsylvania, and you go all the way down to Lucasville, which is at the bottom of the state, 216 area code. You go in there and I holler out 216 Cleveland, where y'all at? They're representing. They're in there, and their sons and daughters are out here, and there's no doubt about it. We are feeding the prison industrial complex big time here in Cleveland.
Wow. That is really amazing. So what's going on here with the Slavic Village?
It's the same thing. Slavic Village has a serious drug problem, and fentanyl is all over there. They come and they bring it off the highway. People coming off of 490, off 77, and many times they slide around these little neighborhoods, get their drugs, and go back. And there's transition in Slavic Village because of the housing debacle. Remember a few years ago when these people lost all these houses, and the houses have been not torn down. And then you've got there's a mixed ethnicity going on. It's just straight up, blacks and whites are mixing more than ever before in these neighborhoods. And young people are starting to organize around these kinds of pursuits. So you got fentanyl, which can be used with the knockoff heroin for people who their drug of first choice had been the opioids and whatever. Now they get the fentanyl and the heroin for less price. The younger boys that are, many of them are African American, and the drug dealers, they're using the fentanyl with what used to be called wet or flocka, and they hallucinate, and it keeps them up all night. So the fentanyl is the base for each parts of those highs, but the highs are different, and different ethnic groups gravitate toward the different drugs. But the bottom line, now you have a serious demand for the drugs, and these young people are going at it because many times they're not organized for real like the ones back in the day, which is a good thing. But the bad thing is the more disorganized they are, the more violent they are.
I see. So I know we've come up with they've came up with a lot of different programs for getting cleaned up and getting into rehabilitation. How easy is it for someone to get into a program like that? And the program's actually really helping them?
No, they're not. It's not enough programs. There's not enough beds. There's not enough people, to be certified. Not that to be chemical dependency certification is necessary. However, there's not enough. I mean, they are downplaying this. They're getting high in the prisons. Last month, I had an inmate call me and say, "Look, man, they putting the stuff in the envelopes and on the letters." And I brought it to somebody's attention, the Bureau of Prison. They kind of scuffed it off, and the next thing you know, the guards had to get hosed down because they take the stuff and dip it in the stuff, let it dry out so the envelope can be smoked or the letter can be smoked, and then they're running around going crazy. That stuff gets on those people, which have to treat them. You have to have gloves on the full body, because if it gets on you, you're gonna pass out.
Really?
So that's why you got the Narcan and all that. The police officers have to carry that, and those that work in EMS and all those kind of areas as well, because if you just get a little bit down on your skin, it's lights out.
Wow, that's
Yep.
some really serious stuff.
Serious.
So, what is it that the community itself can do? Because people don't want to call and say, because they fear for their life. You don't want to be a rat and turn someone in, but yet you got this problem in your neighborhood or next door.
Our thing is, if you see something, say something to somebody. That doesn't necessarily, you have to run it to his own car.
Right.
But what we have to have is more boots on the ground, men and women who are trained that can interact with law enforcement and these young people without losing their street credibility. And it can't be overseen by people who don't have any understanding of our community. The problem in Cleveland is the people with the money want to control everything, and they want to decide who gets the money, who's real, who's authentic. And in reality, they don't know nothing about this work. But, we understand about fiscal accountability and making sure the proposals are written and all that. But that's not the issue in Cleveland. The issue in Cleveland is that Cleveland has these leaders that are basically, they're so wedded to each other, in the sense that it's it's hard to even explain. You go the philanthropic communities all intertwined with each other. The people that are in these areas that come up with the money and then give the biggest set of money to these people who already connected them. And I'll just be straight up. You got people getting millions of dollars to do this work, and they're not delivering anything. But they don't have people that can really analyze what they're doing or not doing, because they're not going to hire people to make sure that their measurements of their outcomes are what they call deliverable. When we started our organization, very few of us was getting money or any kind of thing. I worked in the gang unit for about almost 10 years. And then we decided to go off into, developing philanthropic relationships with these large organizations like the Cleveland Foundation, whatever. And they always want to have somebody over the money that doesn't understand what's being done or what's going on. And so they're going to tell you how much you can pay somebody who's going out there risking their life. And they're going to tell you how your proposals have to be written and how your deliverables have to be and all that kind. And if I hadn't been, recruited, I was recruited by the mayor at that time, Jane Campbell, to become assistant safety director. And we were to go in and start breaking. That's the biggest problem was these law enforcement structures of people who they don't want nobody telling them what to do. The Cleveland Police Division of Police and many of these law enforcement people are incestuous in their relationships with each other. You got the father, you got the grandfather, you got the grandson, they all in the police department. They want to control this and control that. And then they really don't have a lot of respect for a lot of the African Americans. We're just not getting to the point, where, you talk about 10 years of interaction, 2 consent decrees with the FBI, and have come in and say, okay, something's going on here, something's not right, and then we're dealing with obviously the police shootings, and then the whole thing about what were the outcomes of all those shootings, that everybody walked. So police community relations are not going to be good. If every police officer can get away literally with murder, you understand, then obviously the people in the street, police are not going to have good relationships.
So how are those relationships now? Because, it's not as I would say it's kind of like mellowed out a little bit, you know, because it was going on so much that, you know, we were always having meetings or people on the corners and, you know, the voices, they were coming out and letting their voices be heard. And so now it's kind of like it toned down, and then our young people, the young kids, they started standing up and they took their the concerns to Washington, and you know, and they start making an effort and wanting to be heard. And so now, where are we at with that?
Well, that's the reason why we have to have an event like this, because a lot of our young people don't even understand what was accomplished in the 80s and 90s. Many of them weren't even born. And so they, you know, unfortunately, they, you know, have a certain kind of where y'all adults didn't provide and your generation do. You know, they didn't even know what was going on. They don't understand. And a lot of this history wasn't documented the way that it should have been. You know, so we have to interact with the African American Museum, the African American historians, so we can say, look, this is what was accomplished. Now, these statistics, how it was done with people who they seem to be, these are non-traditional leaders. If the brothers from the Nation of Islam, or they got a funny sounding name, or these people don't go to the church, or whatever. So consequently, they're excluded many times from the tables just to begin to talk about the work that they've done. You know, I had to do a lot of that myself, you know, say, look, there's a seat at this table for everybody. You don't have to be from, you know, and my mother and them went to church, my father, you know, religious. But you can't exclude people. And there was so much exclusion going on that a lot of the authenticity that could have been gained from them coming in to talk about what works and what doesn't work and how this goes. Yeah, that'll wear you out just dealing with that. You know, and then now you got the younger ones who many times they don't see, because they grew up in an environment where they're seeing another thing. An example is like this neighborhood here, Huff and what have you. You know, there were a lot of gang summits that were held where those people were brought in and they calmed it down. Now, I didn't say they stopped selling drugs, because many of them stopped shooting each other. That's what we wanted.
Well, that's really important to get there, stop the killing.
Then you know, as these new drugs began to find their ways back into the community, that's when where these hard-hitting conversations have to take place. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of space for that, you know, where you can sit down with young people who've been doing things that have been injurious to other people and what have you, showing them how to resolve a conflict. We got 4 or 5 gang-related groups going on right now in the city of Cleveland. And unfortunately, and you know, not to get into gender, but a lot of their mothers are involved. Their mothers are the OGs. Their mothers are the ones that tell them to go back and get revenge on them, because they may have had 4 or 5 different males in their lives, over 3 different children by 3 different men, and so they still have control over these young men through emotional ties and what have you, and they're not setting the right example. So consequently, these boys are going out at the behest of the mothers, you know, and inflicting violence on each other and whatever. So these are the cultural dynamics that a lot of nobody ever Case Western Reserve, Cleveland State doctoral, they ain't got a clue about what we're talking about right now. And I don't have time to be sitting down trying to convince them, you understand that, oh yeah, you need to listen to what we're talking about, because we're trying to save lives. You know, so that's the kind of thing that we're dealing with now. And this history is important because in the so-called world of what works and doesn't work, everybody talks about best practices. And best practices should be replicated and what have you. Well, we got best practice. We did more with less money than anybody in the United States of America here in Cleveland. I know that for a fact. Nobody pulled more needles out of arms, or more pipes out of people's mouths, or dealt with more women walking them down the street selling their bodies for drugs than the programs that we initiated. There's no doubt about it. You know,
now, what are some of the programs that you guys have initiated?
Well, again, an example is what happens when we have a shooting between, we know, our groups.
Okay.
All right. We have to go get these young men late at night or early, you know, take them somewhere and sit down and talk shop, so to speak. And if you don't have any street authenticity, you're not even gonna get in your bill, so they're not gonna pay no attention anyway. So that's part of what you have to do, is establish the relationship. Then we find out, who do they know? Okay, this young guy got a brother, or maybe his father was in the streets, he's incarcerated, he's dead or whatever, but he knows that we know him because we know what street they come from, who they was down with, and now we can sit down and talk about how long y'all want to go back and forth with this, how many of y'all want to bury each other's brothers and sisters, whatever. And you can sit down with us and we'll show you how to resolve this conflict. That's how it's got to go.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the 10th year anniversary of 99 Treasures.
Oh, 99 Treasures. That is really, an assistant to what it is we do. Very thing. We have trauma in our communities, generational trauma. You know what I mean. But you know that there's families that have 2 or 3 generations where a lot of trauma.
Right.
Young deaths of mothers and fathers, incarceration and things of this nature. And so we have to develop modalities to calm the children down.
Okay.
A lot of our children have hypersensitivity. You know, I go to my house and I got somebody and the music's on or whatever, my wife was pregnant, whatever, and it was some soft jazz or African music or even some recitation of the Quran. Then I go down to the street where this woman is 6 or 7 months pregnant, and she's got a rap song on with a rap bitch better have my money, I'll F your motherfucker.
Right.
That's what her baby is hearing in her stomach.
Right.
And then that baby comes out and is further traumatized from the time that baby comes out to the womb if there's no intervention. So that's trauma, and they can't calm down. And then they're, given little pills at the schools when they come through the doors, the Ritalin and this and that, because they can't calm down in the classroom. And young African American males are just by nature more active, they're more verbal, more this, and so they take the little pill, Jimmy, and go sit down over there. And little Jimmy's going, he got high. And then later on, he's going to want to self-medicate. And nobody's intervening in that situation because nobody wants to say we made a mistake because the pharmaceutical companies are making a profit all this. So we have to address these kind of things that are going on in our community. And now we are working behind the 8 ball, so to speak, because this fentanyl and all this stuff has come out and hit us so hard because the pharmaceutical companies were down with the doctors and the pharmacies, and they all in cahoots with each other, and the drug enforcement agencies their officers were being hired by the pharmaceutical company so they can stand in the breach and make sure the drugs are sold. So you see what we're dealing with. So the artwork is a way of kind of cutting through to their what we call their inner core. All our young people have artistic, aspects of them. So what we started, we sent the prints down and get the paint, and it'd be 25 or 30 of them in a room, and they're bouncing off the walls for the first 5-6 minutes, and then you can hear a pin drop 10 minutes later. So we realized that is therapeutic. Soft music or some African drumming or something that's not stimulating them, so they don't want to be re-stimulated. Then they get into the artwork and they are able to show their creativity. So the 99 Treasures piece is a wraparound thing for them to learn how to draw themselves, how to paint, or whatever it is that they want to do, and reinforce that and encourage that what it is that they want to do. So that's where we're at with the 99 Treasures.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is more of getting them to show them and see what their skills are.
Right.
And giving them a place where they can settle.
Safe, yeah.
And
safe
then in a
environment.
safe
Yeah,
environment.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so now what are we doing with the artwork that they do?
Well, they're gonna be selling it. Yeah, which they're putting it online. They're gonna put it online, and we're gonna have as many as these events that we have. Their artwork will be on display. In fact, for the program that we're having this weekend, if somebody gets a $25 ticket or $50 ticket, whatever, they'll get the artwork along with it, and then, the artwork. They'll either meet the young person or know how to get in touch with the young person that did the artwork that'll be there for them as a result of them, making a donation.
So you all supply the art materials
yeah.
and everything for them. All they
Right.
have to do is just come and show up.
Yeah, right.
What is the age gender of that?
We're starting. Some of them are in kindergarten or first grade.
Okay.
We're near 2 elementary schools, so some of them come in the after-school program. And on Saturdays we have family day.
Okay.
And the parents or the grandparents will bring them in, and they're able to kind of, and then the grandparents are doing the art, or the
Okay.
parents, because it is it's like addictive to a degree because you get that brush. Because I even had to sit down and say, okay, I got to finish my artwork.
Well, you know what? Because art is it's amazing. Because I know even my colleagues, some of my coworkers at work, they're getting into the coloring books and all the different colors,
Right.
and and they doodle and they really getting into this, and it's stimulating, it's relaxing for them, and it helps you, I guess, take your mind from whatever is going on and being able to take it to another, a creative part, because we all are very creative.
And we use spoken word. They get together and do a little poetry thing, and sometimes let them compete with that, and it's that is also therapeutic. And that goes back to the modalities that were developed back in the day. When hip hop first came out, a lot of the gang violence was being addressed by people who would dance with each other, and they throw the cardboard down and start twirling around in their head and bebop and all that.
Right.
That was a form of intervention. And then you had the DJs. People still don't know what like they might think what a DJ is, whatever, but there's a rapper, there's a DJ, there's this, that, and so the DJs would do their thing, the rappers would do their thing. And when you hear these old school groups like Public Enemy, Tribe Called Quest, a lot of the things that they were doing were uplifting lyrics. They were lyrics to stimulate, not beefing with one another based upon where you come from, your colors or whatever. And that became a major intervention in the problems that were going on, particularly in Bronx at that time. You had a guy named Kool Herc that emerged that started taking the double turntables and this Grandmaster Flash, and then the group called Tribe Called Quest. You had X-Clan, which were all dressed in African stuff. They would come out and dance. So all of that was intervention and prevention in New York. But of course, it wasn't given that credit because a lot of black identity stuff is being portrayed by the white community as anti-white. Afrocentricity is anti-white, which is not. It's just saying we're gonna be who we are. But then they shifted it to the West Coast, and the lyrics changed. People were smoking blunts in the middle of the rap thing, or they promoting the alcohol sales. Suge Knight and them, he's doing 28 years of life, right? He's not probably gonna walk out of that prison alive. He was at the first gang summit we had.
So we're promoting poison
I mean,
to our community when
when
you're doing this, and it's amazing because like even in the music, the movie, all of these different industries are making money from this.
Snoop and them, and Dre came out with the Chronic, and we had to address that because they had the Chronic, which is the marijuana, was in red, black, and green. Now, everybody knows what those colors represent.
Right.
Now who told you to do that? Well, that's Interscope Records. Those are European Caucasian men that control the alcohol industry, the tobacco industry. They are major investors in the prisons. And so they want these young men to continue talking about death, raping our women, disrespecting the others. They're like slaves on a plantation. You got a young boy named Chief Keef in Chicago that signed a record deal. He wasn't even old enough to sign the contract. He was 16 or 17. And immediately people were being killed because in Chicago they play those rap songs where they compete. They're not competing, they're going at it. Now he can't even come back to the city he's from because who controls Interscope Records? And Interscope Records owner is tied right into the current mayor of the city of Chicago. But he's trying to turn down the crime, right? So you got all of these kind of things going on, and you got to study it. Because then you realize, that's why the prison population in the United States is twice in China. And China and these so-called dictatorships got a prison population that's less than half of ours, and we the land of the free and home of the brave. All right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because other countries
I got a question. John Breckenridge on Facebook asked this question.
Sorry about that.
What's your opinion on Kanye West?
Kanye West is out of his mind. I mean, he's bipolar. He's got psychological problems. My godson is supposedly on his team, Kid Cudi. The man is dealing with spiritual evil. He's engaged in the black arts and all. If he don't get some help, or somebody else don't get some help from him, he's gonna have a deeper problem than he's having now. But he'd be more than just bipolar.
Wow, powerful.
And Sir John, because he's not here, thank you, John, for tuning in.
Sorry about that.
He had an emergency to come up.
Yeah.
But the anomaly want to know also, let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about the 13th Amendment.
Right. Well, the 13th Amendment is clearly an issue, but it made no sense what Kanye West was. It was ludicrous what he was doing. You know, so our whole thing, if you're going to talk about anything, let's talk about sovereignty. Let's talk about our human rights. Like we got the young man that's coming through. It's the whole thing is that, okay, what is a human right versus a civil right? Why is there always this discussion about civil rights as opposed to human rights? You know, and that's where we can begin to make major changes in how we're dealt with in terms of the criminal justice system. Policing was developed, they were slave catchers. That's what they were. That's where the bounty hunters and all that stuff came from. The whole aspect of law enforcement from a real perspective came from the Moors that ruled in Spain and Italy and all these different places for 800 years. They were called sheriffs. Now you call them sheriffs because they couldn't pronounce the word. So we're depicted as people who are anti-law enforcement. We're depicted as people who are pro-crime and pro-violence and pro-being out of your mind and acting like there's new rules and regulations to the game. Every game got rules. You know, and that's why, you know, I hate my man Suge Knight. But I got to use him as an example. Suge violated all the rules.
The table.
You know, so that's why, you know, we can't hold him up as an example of somebody, you know, that should be emulated. We can't hold up some of these rappers that are, you know, engaged in violence against one another, depicting our women in a certain kind of way, misogynistic lyrics. You know, talking about, you know, this and that, and what it is an internalization of oppression to the point where they sabotage their own, you know, reality. And so they get involved with these relationships, you know, and things of that nature, and everybody got to watch the relationship. So I didn't even watch the Basketball Wives and all this, that the women in our program say, you got to come watch this stuff. You know, then you got the little sitcom that comes on. What's the thing with the brother from Cleveland that's in the little Wednesday night that is back on and Empire.
Okay.
I mean, none of those characters in Empire, not one of them are somebody that should be emulated. From him, his wife, all the way down to whoever, whatever. So who is controlling that narrative? And why would that narrative be put out? Why would Basketball Wives be put out? What is the Hollywood thing? What is the ATL thing? And who is it that has developed this cultural mix that now have our young ladies going at each other that strictly emulate what they're seeing on TV and what these dumb producers are putting out there? The fight that led to the young man being killed in the playground at Zelma George were two females fighting each other. We've had 15 women who have been killed in this city since January, and nobody's talking about it.
My. This, you know.
Yeah, they want to soft pedal this stuff, but you know, in reality, you know, this is serious business. When you got women, mothers, grandmothers being suffocated, killed in the street, and thrown in the garbage behind a church. Only a devil could do something like that, or a human being who is disguised as a devil, or vice versa. But either way, that individual is still walking around because nobody's been charged with that murder.
And you know, it's sad because we have to, people, as a race of people, and all races, why, you know, the making money, there's a way of making money. And, you know, money is not, I wouldn't say money is the ruler of all evil. No, it's not. It's how you go about making that money and what are you doing with it. And to go and poison your own fellow brother and sister to make a dollar bill, you know, and then here they bring in, the ladies, they get impregnated. And then the poor baby is not asked to come here, but the baby has to suffer too. Right. So, you know, where do we stop with the repetition of generation over generation and generation when you go back into history and our slaves are, you know, the forefathers and mothers, they had to go through all of that and they fought, they struggled. And then here we go back and do.
Willingly. Going back to the plantation.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, we are enslaving our own minds when we start taking on and using drugs and, you know, and not being able to have right thinking.
Right. Well, there's no doubt about it. The whole aspect of using germ warfare was big back in the day. You know, my great grandfather was Cherokee, and they were driven. You know, he escaped from the plantation. He married into a Cherokee tribe, but then that tribe was put out on the trail of death. They call it the Trail of Tears, and by being that was controlling that part of Tennessee. You understand? And so consequently, when the war broke out, many of these people came back to get and hook back up with their families. And on that side, many of them had been their oral history is that they were given blankets that were infested with smallpox and things of that nature. So they were engaged in genocide and what we call eugenics. The same thing you hear about now with the tiny white pill, and everybody's giving all this kind of stuff was going on in the southern parts of the region where young ladies were basically made impotent, and some men, because of this fear of black, progress, what they call it white supremacy, which is really a fear of black supremacy, because you got this recessive genetic reality that are in Caucasian European people, and they know when you mix with black people, you're no longer white, you're black, you ain't really mixed. So consequently, we're dealing with that. I got a cousin that was murdered right there by a police officer last year in front of that bowling alley up there on Euclid and Ford. And the tape has not been shown. You understand? The city of Cleveland should have indicted this cop. He should have been fired from the police department. His name is Grazioli. He was made a sergeant. You understand? Nobody knows where he is now. He shot and killed this young man. You understand? Murdered him. But we haven't seen the tape yet because the city of Cleveland gave the case to the county sheriff's department. The county sheriff's department gave it to an independent prosecutor in Columbus. And I called the independent prosecutor's office. They say they haven't gotten anything from Cleveland yet. And this city is under consent decree. Now, but Khalid Samar would be wrong if he mobilized people to go down there and stand in the middle of Euclid and Ford and don't let no traffic go up and down the street. We would be wrong. But that's why you have to have civil disobedience. You have to have protests. You have to have people that are willing to stand up. You got to get their attention. Because now everybody's forgot about it. But I haven't forgot about it. You understand? So these are the kind of things that we're dealing with, even when we're talking about, our own self-determination. A young man unarmed, 21 years old, you understand, no weapon. Why did he have to be shot? Why was he murdered? Why wasn't the pepper spray utilized? Why couldn't he hit him with a wand or whatever? Right. The man, we haven't seen a tape. This is Cleveland, Ohio. We're not down in Mississippi now. We're right here on Euclid Avenue. That happened right up the street. How come the black elected officials, the NAACP, and all these people talking about they represent leadership as elected officials, how come they demanded to see that tape?
Yeah, well, we've got seems like a lot of work needs to be going on here. And there's so many different issues. I look at a lot of the programs that we have on our cable TV, and you see where they go in and they, my partner is speaking too. Let me get his little question in here.
Right.
He says the statistics that the African American males and females are graduating more from college than any other group. So who of our children are we talking about? So who are the group of folks that we're talking about? Because there is a sector that is doing positive things. And we do have young black adults, teenagers, college students that are doing outstanding things. Maybe they're not getting enough attention.
Right.
So this group of sector that you're talking about, are they in a certain area or demographic, or is it dealing with the money?
I don't know what he's talking about, but we are not statistically where we should be as a demographic, especially given what our parents, were able to accomplish in the post-World War II area, post-Korean War, where, there were large segments of people our age that went to college. I myself and most of the people I was in high school with, it was either the military or college. But Cleveland had so many jobs, the unemployment rate was low in the black community at that time. So you're right, that next generation that came out of that, there was a lot of people that went to college, graduating on, but demographically, there were still large segments of our community that were left behind.
Okay.
As you know, at the peak of the population, the black population in Cleveland, the steel mills, the auto manufacturing facilities, and these large, what they call them, supportive industries, the unemployment rate went up. And that's when the crime began to go up and other things began to happen, because those jobs were going to Mexico, or they were, aging out or what have you. So you're right, there is a demographic that goes to college. I got 4 daughters, all of them got postgraduate degrees and this and that, but we don't judge the war by the minority of those in our community. We don't judge it by the casualties either, but we have to take stock of where we're at today. Cleveland's municipal school district got another F. Their East Cleveland had to file a temporary injunction to keep the state from taking over their school. Port Lorraine, which is right down the street from us, they got an F. They got somebody in the superintendent's position that's not even from the city. So we do have this kind of dynamic about power. And that's why I go back to this thing about black empowerment and making sure that we have organizations that are speaking to the need for us to be, unified. That don't mean you have to have uniformity, but we need to have unity, and our young people and the elders need to sit down, and they need to understand what was accomplished, what was not accomplished, and here are the different struggles, or within the struggle, the things that need to be dealing with, because this man is now a sitting judge. Kavanaugh is going to try to break all that affirmative action down. He's coming after, so now we're going to have this whole thing going on about what does it mean to be a minority student at Cleveland State or Michigan State or whatever, and you got immigrants coming over here and everybody's competing. But then we have to put in the mindset of our young people that you have the ancestral spirit in you that goes back to the beginning of mathematics and science. The first math came out of Egypt. Egypt is in Africa. There is no Middle East. So the science, the architecture, the astronomy, all that came out of Africa. There is no Middle East. If it is, show me the Middle West. So they're conceptually incarcerated by thinking that thinking and technology and all that belongs to white people or European people, or medicine. Cleveland Clinic is right up the street. They're not going to sit there and hold a press conference and say, yeah, Imhotep is the father of medicine. So every time you walk past Cleveland Clinic, you put a statue of Imhotep, who was a little black man out of Kemet, out of Egypt, who was the one that they called the father of medicine. It wasn't Hippocrates, the hypocrite. It was Imhotep. So if our young people at MLK High School and John Hay High School can go and look and see a statue of Imhotep, a sure enough black man who built the step pyramid and who was the father of medicine, then they know they can do medicine. They can do mathematics. They understand that astronomy and the first picture of the galaxy is inside the pyramids, and there was a black pharaoh at that time. They won't have no problem thinking they can do math.
Well, we want to thank you for sharing with all that history, and I think maybe you should put this all into a book. That would be great to have this all set up in a book. Now, your event is going to be this Friday and Saturday.
Yeah.
Give our audience the information on how they can attend and participate with the event.
Right, we're going to be at the Mount Pleasant Neighborhood Center, which is 13815 Kinsman, and it'll be Friday and Saturday. We're going to start off Friday morning about 10 o'clock. We have a meet and greet, and we're going to have a lot of people who were involved in the early days of the Coalition for a Better Life. Some of them are judges now, many of them are, doing this, doing that. So we're trying to get them to come in to kind of give an overview of how they, became a part of the coalition. And then Saturday, we're going to kind of review a lot of that for what we're going to put in the legacy that will go into the documentation to the African American Museum.
Okay.
Fannie Lewis, Lou Stokes, Omar Ali Bey, Harley L. Jones, many of the people who helped to change life in the city of Cleveland for the better. And on that Saturday afternoon, we have what is called edutainment. Not entertainment, edutainment.
Okay.
And educating young people, having hip-hop artists like our young brother Truth Speaker, who traveled all over the world on behalf of the United Nations last year, espousing this hip-hop that was uplifting black women and black people, not talking about, you know, clothes and
Right.
dumb stuff and all that.
Right.
And he was giving us support because it's called the Year of the Child
Okay.
last year, and that whole thing was addressing what are the needs of children so they can grow up and have successful lives, and what do they need to do. And he put that in a hip hop and rap.
So
you know,
they can communicate
yeah.
because they hear it and
Right, right.
you have to speak in their language,
The language
so they can be
understand,
heard, so they can
yeah,
understand.
yeah,
That is
yeah.
awesome.
So we'll be there Saturday, and we have Hugh people will be there as well, and some African drumming and things. But our whole thing is intergenerational. You know, the tickets are $10 and $25, but we're not gonna turn nobody away. If you buy a ticket, you will get some artwork from some of the youth and what have you. So we're encouraging, you know, the community to come out, and then we're encouraging our young people to be, and parents, bring your children. You drag them, you know, with their little phone, whatever they gotta bring. You know, they can't. You gotta have the phone. Let them have the phone. You bring them on with you.
Well, bring the phone, because then maybe they can take some pictures and put that on, put some good stuff on Facebook.
We give them all these Black history names, African American history, and they can Google it up. They can
Right.
go on Dr. Google
Yeah,
and find out,
yeah.
you know, if it's real or not.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's I think that's awesome.
Right.
And now also, I see that you will be you're in need of storage containers
Right.
for the program of arts.
Mhm,
Tell our audience what they can do and far as getting that to you.
As you know, the painting, it causes for people to have containers for their own personal things. It's, you know, budgets don't allow. A lot of times you get a little grant that you can't buy this, can't buy that.
Right.
So we're trying to get people to donate storage containers, paint, whatever they can. That way we can meet the budgetary demands of whoever it is that's funding us for what it is we got to do, you know, next week or the week after. But the main thing also is to have them come in and participate in it so they can see that their money is being spent.
Going to
in
a
an
good
effective way.
cause.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and how and give that information again and a phone number of where they can call and
216-538-4043 and 216-618-8806. You can reach us on Facebook, Twitter, Peace in the Hood at Yahoo. Also, we have 99 Treasures, and you know, basically we have a lot of Facebook activity and a lot of Instagram activity on our site. So yeah.
okay, well
Yeah.
that is just really awesome. I'm glad that you're still going strong.
Mhm.
You've been out here for a long time in the city. You know, I know you are the man that shows up when there is something going wrong.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And you try to bring peace
Mhm.
on both sides
Right.
of the, you know, the situation. And that's good because I think that you're really a great peacemaker.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you're taking a lot of your time and you're, you're gifted to doing this,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And how long have you been out here doing? I mean, you've been doing this for,
yeah,
what, over
it's
30,
been
40
about
years?
30 plus years.
Yeah.
I was fortunate, you know, my parents afforded me with opportunities to, on my father's side, you know, they were hustlers. And, you know, he wasn't, but they had numbers and all that stuff. My
Right.
grandmother had a little store.
Right.
She did the numbers and all that. So they were like, my uncles were like, almost like gangsters. But on my mother's side, they were the more nurturing and people, this and that, you know. But I got both best of both worlds. And I was fortunate. I played basketball and went to school and went to college and traveled. That afforded me an opportunity to see that we came over in different ships. Now we're in the same boat.
Great. Well, listen, you know, we could just go on and on and on about all of this, but I really appreciate you coming on today.
Right.
This is what's going on here in our city of Cleveland. So come on out and celebrate Khalid Salim for the 10th year anniversary of the 99 Treasures. That'll be this week, October 12th and 13th. And those hours of this event will be from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Both days?
Yep.
All right. So thank you for coming
Thank
on
you
with
for
what's
inviting
going
me,
on
and
with.
thank you for a radio program and may we continue to build on this medium.
Yes,
'Cause,
and
you know, it's like the time of the prophets. Moses was a man who did magic. You know, Jesus performed miracles, and now we in what is called the media time. We got to be on the media. We have
Great.
to be on the media.
And so let's support our youth with the artwork. And we look forward to seeing you next Sunday, same place, same time. And this is what's going on with Lady D and the Sir John Show. Our anomaly will be back next week. And if you want to be on our show, give us a call at 216-571-2235. the home of the 25 cent. We good?